Captain Lee Daeho pressed his fingers against the cool metal surface of his ship's control panel. The stars outside his cockpit window looked like tiny diamonds scattered across black cloth. His small scout ship drifted silently through the empty space between two solar systems. This was the kind of work he knew best. Quiet, alone, safe. Lee had been flying reconnaissance missions for 15 years. He mapped unexplored sectors, checked for mineral deposits, and watched for signs of alien activity. The pay was decent, and nobody asked too many questions about his past. That suited him just fine. His ship, the Blue Crane, was old but reliable. The hull showed scratches from micrometeorites, and the engine made strange noises sometimes, but she had never let him down. Lee treated her like a trusted friend, because in many ways, she was his only friend. The mission today seemed routine. Survey Grid 77 Alpha in the Krillian sector. Look for anything unusual. File a report, get paid. Go home to a small apartment on New Sol Station, and drink cheap whiskey until he could sleep. But the universe had other plans. Lee was checking his star charts when his instruments started acting strange. The long-range scanner began picking up energy readings. That made no sense. The numbers kept changing, jumping from normal background radiation to levels that should have been impossible. "What the hell?" Lee muttered, tapping the scanner display with his finger. Sometimes the old equipment just needed a gentle reminder to work properly. The readings did not change. If anything, they got stranger. Lee leaned forward in his pilot. Seaton studied the data more carefully. The energy signature was unlike anything in his database. It was not the steady pulse of a starship engine or the chaotic burst of a solar flare. This was something else entirely, something organized, something intelligent. His mouth went dry. In 15 years of flying solo missions, Lee had never encountered anything that scared him. Pirates, radiation storms, equipment failures, all of these things he could handle. The unknown could kill you in ways you never imagined. Lee checked his position. He was still in human space, but barely. The border with the Veilthran Empire was only 2 light years away. The Veilthrans had ruled this part of the galaxy for 800 years. They were powerful, cruel, and they did not like humans very much. Most humans who worked this close to the border carried fake identification and kept their mouths shut. Lee was no different. His real name was not even Lee Daeho, but that was a story for another day. The energy readings were getting stronger. Lee powered up his recording equipment and turned his ship toward the source of the signal. His hands shook slightly as he adjusted the controls. Whatever was out there, he needed to document it. That was his job. The Blue Crane moved slowly through space, her engines running at minimum power to avoid detection. Lee had learned long ago that making noise in the wrong place could get you killed. The Veilthran Empire had patrol ships that could reduce his little scout to space dust in seconds. 20 minutes later, Lee saw something that made his heart stop. A ship was materializing out of empty space. Not jumping out of hyperspace or dropping from light speed. It's actually materializing like it was being painted into existence by an invisible hand. Lee rubbed his eyes and looked again. The ship was still there, and it was huge. Easily the size of a Veilthran battlecruiser, but shaped completely different. Instead of the angular, aggressive design of Imperial warships, this vessel looked almost organic. Its hull curved and flowed like it had been grown rather than built. The surface of the ship seemed to shift and change as Lee watched. Sometimes it looked metallic, sometimes it appeared to be made of some kind of dark crystal. Colors moved across its surface like oil on water, deep blues and purples, mixed with flashes of gold and silver. Lee fumbled for his camera controls, trying to record what he was seeing. His hands were shaking badly now. This was not a human ship. It was not a Veilthran ship either. This was something else, something that should not exist. The unknown vessel hung motionless in space for several minutes. Lee watched it through his telescope, trying to understand what he was looking at. The ship had no visible weapons, no engine exhausts, no communication arrays. It was smooth and seamless, like a single piece of carved stone. Then it began to move. The ship accelerated without any visible thrust. It simply started moving, picking up speed in a way that violated every law of physics Lee knew. No flames shot from engines. No gravitational distortions marked its passage. It just moved as easily as a fish swimming through water. Lee watched. The ship approached a small Veilthrin listening post about 50,000 kilometers away. The Imperial station was a tiny thing, barely large enough for a dozen soldiers. It monitored communications and watched for smugglers trying to cross the border. The unknown ship stopped near the listening post and extended what looked like a beam of golden light. The beam touched the Imperial station gently, almost caressingly. Lee could see the energy readings on his instruments spike to incredible levels. The scan lasted for exactly 30 seconds. Then the golden beam withdrew, and the unknown ship began to fade, moving away, not jumping to hyperspace. Fading like a ghost returning to whatever realm ghosts called home. Within minutes, the ship was completely gone. Lee stared at the empty space where it had been, wondering if he had imagined the whole thing, but his instruments still showed. Residual energy readings. The recordings on his camera proved that something had happened. Something impossible. Lee tried to contact the Veilthrin listening post, using emergency frequencies that both sides respected. There was no response. The station appeared intact from the outside, but nobody answered his calls. A cold fear settled in Lee's stomach. Whatever that ship had done to the Imperial station, it had not been good for the people inside. Lee turned his ship around and headed for home as fast as his engines could carry him. He needed to report what he had seen, even though he knew nobody would believe him. His camera footage would be dismissed as fake. His sensor readings would be explained away as equipment malfunction. But Lee knew what he had seen was real. Somewhere out there, someone or something had technology that made the mighty Veilthrin Empire look like children playing with toys. And they had just demonstrated their power on an Imperial target. The question was simple. Were they friends? Or enemies of humanity? Lee suspected he would find out soon enough. Admiral Kim Haeonsu stood on the bridge of the Imperial dreadnought Thunder of Veilth, staring at the tactical display with growing frustration. 3 listening posts had gone silent in the past week. 3 separate installations, each staffed with experienced Imperial soldiers, had simply stopped responding to all communications. Kim was human, but he had served the Veilthrin Empire for 12 years. He had earned his rank through blood and betrayal, turning his back on his own species for the promise of power and position. The Veilthrins valued his tactical knowledge of human psychology, and Kim had proven useful in putting down human rebellions across the sector. Today, however, Kim felt a familiar ache in his chest. The same feeling he had experienced when he first chose to serve the Empire instead of fighting it. The feeling that whispered he had made a terrible mistake. Admiral called Lieutenant Vexstar, a tall Veilthron with blue-scaled skin and eyes like black diamonds. "We're approaching listening post." Kim nodded and moved closer to the main viewing screen. The listening post appeared exactly as it should. Solar panels gleamed in the light of the nearby star. Communication arrays pointed toward key shipping lanes. The station's hull showed no signs of damage or battle. "Scan for life signs," Kim ordered. The ship's sensors swept across the small station. The results appeared on the tactical display. Moments later, Kim felt his blood turn cold as he read the data. "0 life signs detected," reported the tactical officer. "No heat signatures, no movement, no biological activity of any kind." Kim had seen many battles in his career. He had watched cities burn and fleets destroyed in the vacuum of space. But there was something deeply wrong about a station that looked perfectly normal but contained no living beings. "Prepare a boarding party," Kim commanded. Full environmental suits. "Assume hostile contamination." 30 minutes later, Kim watched through helmet cameras as his soldiers explored the empty listening post. The Imperial troops moved carefully through corridors that should have been filled with activity. Every room they entered told the same story. Equipment functioning normally. Personal belongings left exactly where their owners had placed them. Food still warm in the mess hall. But no people, not even bodies. "Sir," came the voice of Sergeant Rokon through the communication system, "you need to see this." The camera feed showed the station's main control room. Multiple workstations displayed normal operational data. Coffee cups sat half empty next to computer terminals. A game of cards lay abandoned on a side table. The players apparently called away in the middle of a hand. Looks like they just vanished, Sergeant Rokon continued. No signs of struggle, no weapon discharges. They were here one moment and gone the next. Kim studied the scene through the camera feed. In his years of military service, he had never encountered anything like this. Pirates killed their victims. Rebels took prisoners. Alien predators left evidence of their feeding. But this was something else entirely. "Bring me all the security recordings," Kim ordered, "and check the logs for any unusual activity in the past 72 hours. While his soldiers worked, Kim contacted the crew of his ship. Open a secure channel to Imperial Command. Priority: Alpha clearance. Minutes later, the holographic image of General Dexmore appeared on the communication screen. The Veil-Thrune military leader was ancient, even by his species standards, with scales that had turned silver with age and scars from a dozen major conflicts. "Report Admiral Kim," General Dexmore demanded in his raspy voice. "Third listening post. Confirmed empty, sir. No casualties. No signs of battle." The personnel simply disappeared. General Dexmore was quiet for several seconds. When he spoke again, his voice carried a note of anger that Kim had rarely heard. "Human rebels," the general said with certainty. "They have developed some new weapon. Some cowardly trick to avoid. Honest battle," Kim wanted to argue, but he had learned long ago not to contradict his Veil-Thrune superiors. Still, something about this situation felt wrong. Human rebels were brave but predictable. They fought with guns and explosives and desperate courage. They did not make people vanish without a trace. "What are your orders, sir?" Kim asked. "Begin interrogations immediately. Round up every human in the sector. Use whatever methods necessary to find out what they know about these disappearances." The holographic image flickered and disappeared, leaving Kim alone with his thoughts. He knew what those orders meant. Torture, mass arrests, executions of innocent people based on nothing more than their species. Kim had done such things before. He told himself it was necessary for the stability of the Empire. He told himself that human rebels brought such actions on themselves, but deep in his heart he knew he was simply trying to justify the unjustifiable. 2 days later, Kim received reports from across the sector. Imperial forces had arrested over 3,000 humans. The interrogations had begun immediately, using methods that Kim preferred not to think about too carefully, but the humans knew nothing. Factory workers, farmers, shopkeepers, and traders all told the same story. They had heard rumors about missing Imperial stations, but they had no knowledge of any rebel operation capable of making people disappear. Kim reviewed the interrogation reports in his private quarters, nursing a glass of Terran whiskey that he kept hidden from his Veil-Thrune colleagues. The alcohol burned his throat, but it helped dull the guilt that gnawed at his conscience. A soft chime indicated an incoming message. Kim activated his personal communication terminal and saw the face of Captain Park Min-jae, one of his human intelligence officers. Admiral Park said quietly, "I have been analyzing the security footage from all 3 listening posts. What did you find?" "Nothing, sir. That is the problem. The recordings show normal activity up until a specific moment, then they simply end. Not damaged or destroyed. They just stop recording as if someone turned off the cameras." Kim felt a chill run down his spine. How is that possible? "Now, I do not know, sir. But there is something else." Each station stopped recording at exactly the same time of day, 1400 hours, ship time. Whatever happened to these stations, it was coordinated with precision that suggests advanced planning. Kim ended the communication and walked to his small window, looking out at the stars. Somewhere in that darkness, something was hunting Imperial forces with technology and methods beyond his understanding. And the Empire's response was to torture innocent humans who knew nothing about the threat they faced for the first time in 12 years. Admiral Kim Hyunsu wondered if he had chosen the wrong side after all. Dr. Park So-min wiped the sweat from her forehead as she carefully brushed dirt away from the ancient stone tablet. The ruins on planet Kepler 44 to be had been calling to her for months. but she had never expected to find anything like this. The tablet was covered in symbols that looked familiar yet impossible. The hieroglyphs showed detailed pictures of ships that matched exactly what Captain Lee Daeho had described in his report. Ships that appeared from nowhere and vanished like ghosts. Park had been studying ancient civilizations for 20 years. She had explored dead worlds and translated forgotten languages across half the galaxy. But these ruins were different. The dating equipment showed they were millions of years old, far older than any known civilization. Yet the stone carvings depicted technology that seemed more advanced than anything humans, or even the Veilthrons, possessed. This makes no sense, Park muttered to herself as she took photographs of the symbols. The hieroglyphs told a story of beings called the Shepherds, who watched over the galaxy. They came when the balance was threatened. When one species grew too powerful and threatened to destroy everything, Park's hands trembled slightly as she realized what she was reading. According to these ancient texts, the Shepherds had intervened many times throughout galactic history. They had prevented wars that would have consumed entire star systems. They had stopped the rise of empires that would have enslaved every living being. And now they had returned, 300 light-years away. General Yang Tae-woo sat in a hidden bunker beneath the surface of New Busan Colony. The underground chamber served as headquarters for the human resistance movement, though calling it a movement was probably too generous. Yang commanded maybe 2,000 fighters scattered across dozens of worlds. Until this week, Yang had considered their cause hopeless. The Veilthron Empire controlled millions of soldiers and thousands of warships. Human rebels could win small victories through surprise and desperation. They could never defeat the Empire in open warfare. Now everything had changed. Yang studied the report spread across his metal desk. Had gone dark in the past 10 days. Not just listening posts anymore, but supply depots, patrol bases, and even a small fleet garrison. Thousands of Imperial personnel had simply vanished without firing a shot. Sir, called Lieutenant Kim Sura from across the bunker. We just received another transmission from the underground network. The Empire has increased security at all, remaining bases by 300%? Yang nodded grimly. Fear was spreading through Imperial ranks like a plague. Veilthron commanders, who had never known defeat, were now jumping at shadows and seeing threats everywhere. The Empire's response had been predictably brutal. Mass arrests of humans continued across the sector. Entire families were being taken from their homes and transported to Imperial detention centers. Yang had received reports of torture, execution, and worse. But for the first time in years, Yang felt something he had almost forgotten. Hope. Have we made contact with whoever is doing this? Yang asked. No, sir. They do not respond to any communications. But the pattern is clear. They only target Imperial military assets. They have not harmed a single civilian. Yang walked to the bunker's small observation window and looked up at the night sky. Somewhere out there, unknown allies were fighting. The Empire with weapons and methods beyond his understanding. He did not know who they were or what they wanted, but they were giving humanity a chance Yang intended to use. On the other side of the sector, engineer Park Jung-sek worked frantically in his small laboratory. The young inventor had been developing faster-than-light communication technology for the past 3 years, trying to create a way for human colonies to coordinate their resistance efforts. His prototype quantum communication device was almost ready for testing, but Jung-sek had noticed something strange in his recent experiments. Whenever he powered up the device, it detected unusual energy patterns in nearby space. Patterns that seemed to match the residual traces left behind at the sites of Imperial disappearances. Jung-sek had been monitoring the energy signatures for days, trying to understand what they meant. The readings suggested that whatever was causing the disappearances operated outside normal space and time. The technology involved principles that human science barely understood, but Jung-sek was beginning to form a theory. What if the attackers were not really attacking at all? What if they were using some form of advanced teleportation to remove Imperial personnel? The energy patterns would be consistent with matter displacement on a massive scale. Jung-sek activated his communication device and began scanning for similar energy signatures across the sector. What he found made his heart race with excitement and terror. The energy patterns were everywhere. Dozens of them, moving through space like invisible shadows. Whatever was out there, there were many of them. They were coordinating their actions. With precision that suggested incredible intelligence, Captain Lim Soo-jin had been smuggling goods across the Imperial border for 8 years. She knew every patrol route, every checkpoint, every bribe that needed to be paid to keep her ship flying. But she had never encountered anything like what happened during her run to the Epsilon colonies. Soo-jin was piloting her cargo ship, Silver Fox, through a supposedly empty sector when her instruments detected the same energy signature that Captain Lee Dae-ho had reported. Soo-jin powered down her engines and waited, hardly daring to breathe. The unknown ship materialized directly in front of her, just as Lee had described. Organic curves, shifting colors, impossible grace. But instead of ignoring her small vessel, the ship seemed to notice her presence. A beam of soft blue light touched the Silver Fox gently. Soo-jin felt a strange tingling sensation, as if someone was examining her thoughts. The sensation lasted only seconds. But in that time, Soo-jin somehow understood that she was not in danger. Then the ship transmitted something to her computer. Not words or images, but pure mathematical data. Coordinates to a location deep in unexplored space, along with what appeared to be access codes for some kind of facility. The unknown ship faded away moments later, leaving Soo-jin alone with questions that burned in her mind like fire. Someone, or something, had just given her directions to a place that should not exist. And Soo-jin had the feeling that whatever she found there would change everything. The pattern was becoming clear across the sector. The Empire was losing control, and humanity was about to discover that they were not alone in their fight for freedom. Captain Lee Dae-ho felt his heart pounding as the Silver Fox approached the coordinates that Captain Lim Soo-jin had received from the unknown ship. The ancient space station hung in the darkness like a metal ghost, its hull covered in symbols that matched the hieroglyphs Dr. Park Soman had found on Kepler 442b. "Are you sure about this?" General Yang Tae-woo asked from the co-pilot's seat. The resistance leader had insisted on joining this mission personally, despite the obvious dangers. "No," Lee replied honestly, "but we need answers. The Empire is going crazy. They executed 200 humans yesterday just because someone reported seeing suspicious lights in the sky." Dr. Park Soman worked at her portable computer in the passenger section, comparing the station's design to her archaeological findings. "The architecture matches perfectly," she said with excitement in her voice. "This station is definitely connected to the shepherds mentioned in the ancient texts." Engineer Park Jung-sik monitored his quantum communication device, watching energy readings that made no sense according to known physics. "The power source for this station is incredible," he reported. "It is generating more energy than a small star, but I cannot detect any reactor or fuel system." Captain Lim Soo-jin guided her ship toward a docking port that seemed designed specifically for vessels their size. "The access codes are working," she announced. "Whatever sent me those coordinates wanted us to find this place." The docking process completed smoothly, as if the ancient station was welcoming them home. The 5 humans gathered their equipment and prepared to explore what might be the most important discovery in galactic history. The airlock opened to reveal corridors filled with soft, golden light that seemed to come from the walls themselves. The air was clean and warm, perfectly suited for human lungs. Their footsteps echoed softly as they walked deeper into the station. "This technology is impossibly advanced," Jung-sik whispered, running his instruments along the walls. "The materials are not metal or plastic or anything I recognize. It is like the entire station was grown rather than built." They followed the main corridor for 10 minutes before reaching a massive chamber filled with glowing crystals and flowing streams of light. At the center of the room stood a single pillar of white stone, smooth and perfectly round, as they approached. The pillar, a holographic image, began to form above its surface. The image resolved into the figure of an elderly human man wearing simple clothes and a gentle smile. "Greetings," the figure said in perfect Korean. "I am Dr. Yoon Sang-woo, and I have been waiting a very long time to meet you." The 5 explorers stared at the hologram in shocked silence. Finally, General Yang found his voice. You are human. But this station is millions of years old. Dr. Yoon nodded sadly. I'm more complicated than your scientists understand. I am indeed human, but I come from your far future. My consciousness has been preserved in this station for longer than your civilization has existed. Dr. Park stepped forward, her archaeological training overcoming her amazement. You are one of the shepherds mentioned in the ancient texts. Yes. And no, Dr. Yoon replied. The shepherds are what humanity becomes thousands of years from now. We evolve beyond physical form, becoming beings of pure energy, capable of traveling through time and space at will. Lee felt dizzy as he tried to process this information. Why are you here? Why are you helping us? The holographic figure gestured, and images began appearing in the air around them. Star charts, battle scenes, and technical diagrams that hurt to look at directly. The Veilthrin Empire was destined to discover a weapon of unimaginable power, Dr. Yoon explained. A device that could tear holes in the fabric of space and time itself. In the original timeline, they used this weapon to destroy entire solar systems. Eventually, their experiments caused a cascade failure that eliminated all life in this galaxy. Yang clenched his fists. So you came back to stop them? We cannot directly interfere with the timeline without causing paradoxes that could be even worse than the original disaster, Dr. Yoon said. But we can provide subtle guidance. We can remove key Imperial personnel and assets. We can give present-day humanity the tools they need to save themselves. Jung-Sik pointed at the flowing lights that surrounded them. This is how you make people disappear. You transport them through time. We move them to a safe location in the far future, Dr. Yoon confirmed. They are not harmed, merely relocated to a time when they can do no damage to the timeline. Dr. Park looked around the chamber with wonder. But why us? Why reveal yourselves to us now? The hologram smiled more broadly. Because humanity in this time period carries something special. Genetic modifications that we planted in your DNA thousands of years ago, when activated by the proper energy frequencies, these modifications will enhance your intelligence, reflexes, and intuition. Dr. Yoon gestured again, and a new set of images appeared. Humans, moving with impossible speed and grace. Human minds processing information at superhuman rates. Human pilots outmaneuvering alien spacecraft with ease. The modifications are already beginning to activate, Dr. Yoon continued. Have you not noticed that human rebels have been more successful lately? That your plans work better than they should? That you sometimes know things you should not know? Lee thought about his encounter with the unknown ship. He had somehow known exactly where to position his vessel to get the best recordings. His hands had moved to the right controls without conscious thought. Yang remembered recent resistance operations that had succeeded despite impossible odds. His fighters had known exactly when to attack and when to retreat, as if they could predict enemy movements. Dr. Park recalled her archaeological work.
Ow.
She had been drawn to specific dig sites by instincts she could not explain. Her translations of ancient languages had come easier than they should have. The Empire has maybe 6 months before these genetic modifications reach full activation in the human population. Dr. Yoon explained. When that happens, no alien force in the galaxy will be able to defeat humanity in open conflict. Jung-Sik felt excitement building in his chest. What do we need to do? Return to your people. Share what you have learned. Unite the human colonies. Under strong leadership, enhanced abilities will guide you, but you must have the courage to use them. The hologram began to fade. The timeline is still fragile. The Empire may yet discover the weapon that destroys everything. But now humanity has a chance to prevent that disaster. Dr. Yoon's image disappeared, leaving the 5 humans alone in the glowing chamber. They looked at each other with new understanding. They were no longer just rebels fighting a hopeless war against superior forces. They were the key to saving the entire galaxy. 3 months after the discovery at the ancient station, the galaxy had changed beyond recognition. General Yang Tae-woo stood on the bridge of the human flagship Freedom's Dawn. Watching enemy ships fall like leaves in a storm, the genetic modifications were fully active now. Every human in the sector could feel the change. Their minds worked faster, processing tactical information at incredible speeds. Their reflexes had become superhuman. Most importantly, they seemed to know exactly what their enemies would do before the enemies knew it themselves. Yang smiled as he watched the battle unfold. Captain Xiao Donghan commanded the human fleet with skill that amazed even Yang. The young pilot had been flying cargo ships just 6 months ago. Now he coordinated the movements of 300 vessels as if he had been born to command. Enemy dreadnought, attempting to flank our left wing, reported Lieutenant Kim Sura from the tactical station. Already adjusting, Captain Sio replied calmly. 3rd Squadron, execute pattern Delta 7 in 15 seconds. Yang watched the human ships move into position with perfect timing. The veil-thrown dreadnought emerged from its flanking maneuver, directly into a crossfire that tore its shields apart in seconds. The enhanced humans did not just react to enemy movements, they anticipated them. They knew where Imperial ships would be before those ships had even begun moving. On the planet below, President Moon Ji-hoon addressed representatives from dozens of liberated worlds. The former mining engineer had been elected leader of the new Human Federation just 2 weeks ago. Speech was being broadcast across the entire sector. Today we do not fight for conquest, Moon declared, his voice carrying strength that inspired millions. We fight for the right of every species to choose its own destiny. We fight to end 800 years of tyranny and fear. The response was overwhelming.
Yes.
Not just humans, but dozens of alien species that had suffered under Imperial rule were joining the rebellion. They saw that humanity offered something the Empire never had. Hope Admiral Kim Hyansu stood in the detention cell where the rebellion had placed him after his capture. The human traitor had finally tried to switch sides when he realized the Empire was doomed, but General Yang had refused his offer. Some betrayals cannot be forgiven, Yang had told him. You chose power over your own people. Now you live with that choice. Kim stared through the energy bars at the guards outside his cell. They were young humans, probably born on Imperial worlds. Their eyes held no hatred, only disappointment, that somehow hurt worse than anger would have. Through his cell window, Kim could see the battle raging in space above. Imperial ships that should have dominated any human fleet were being destroyed with ease. The enhanced humans fought like they could see the future. Perhaps they could. Dr. Choi Min-ho crouched in the maintenance tunnel beneath the Imperial Research Facility on Nexus Prime. The captured scientist had spent years being forced to work on projects he despised. Now he finally had a chance to strike back. The facility housed the Empire's most secret research, including the timeline-destroying weapon that Dr. Yoon Sang-woo had warned them about. Choi's enhanced mind processed the facility's blueprints with perfect clarity. He knew exactly where to place the explosives to cause maximum damage. He also knew that he would not survive the blast, but that was acceptable. His sacrifice would prevent a weapon that could destroy all life in the galaxy. Choi activated the timer and whispered a prayer for the future of humanity. The explosion lit up the night sky above Nexus Prime like a second sun. Emperor Vexthal watched the destruction from his palace throne room, his ancient mind struggling to understand how everything had gone so wrong. The Veilthran ruler had lived for 3,000 years. He had conquered dozens of worlds and enslaved entire species, but he had never faced anything like these enhanced humans. My lord, gasped General Vexmore as he limped into the throne room. The old warrior was bleeding from wounds that would have killed most beings. Human fleet has broken through our final defensive line. They will reach the capital within hours. Emperor Vexthal closed his eyes. The reports from across the Empire painted the same picture everywhere. Human forces were winning victories that should have been impossible. They moved like they were guided by divine inspiration. Activate the Void Destroyer, the Emperor commanded. General Vexmore went pale. My lord, that weapon is still experimental. Could tear a hole in space itself. Better to risk everything than lose to inferior beings, the Emperor snarled. But when they contacted the research facility, they learned that Dr. Choi Min-ho had already destroyed their ultimate weapon. The device that could have eliminated entire star systems was now nothing but radioactive debris. Captain Lee Dae-ho piloted his new fighter ship through the Imperial capital's defensive grid with impossible precision. The blue crane had been destroyed months ago, but the rebellion had given him something better. Ship designed using technology from the ancient station. Lee could feel the enhanced abilities flowing through his mind like electricity. He knew exactly where each enemy missile would be. He could predict the movement of every Imperial fighter. The battle felt less like combat and more like a carefully choreographed dance. All squadrons, this is Freedom Leader, came Captain SEO's voice over the communication system. Imperial capital ship is attempting to surrender. Lee looked through his cockpit window at the massive Veilthrin flagship. Its weapons were powered down, and it was broadcasting surrender codes on all frequencies. The war was over. 1 year later, Lee stood on the observation deck of Unity Station, the new capital of the Human Federation. Through the transparent aluminum windows, he could see ships from dozens of species coming and going peacefully. The former Imperial territories were now free. Each species governed itself according to its own traditions and values. The humans provided protection and coordination, but they did not rule. Dr. Park Soman had been appointed as the Federation's chief archaeologist, tasked with studying ancient sites across the galaxy. Her work had revealed that the Shepherds had intervened many times throughout history, always working to preserve freedom and prevent galactic catastrophe. Engineer Park Jung-sik led the Federation's research division, developing new technologies based on principles learned from the ancient station. His quantum communication networks allowed instant coordination across thousands of light years. Captain Lim Soo-jin commanded the Federation's merchant marine, ensuring that trade flowed freely between the liberated worlds. Her ships carried not just goods, but hope for a better future. As Lee watched the peaceful traffic around Unity Station, he thought about the unknown ships that had started everything. They had not appeared since the final battle above Nexus Prime, but Lee knew they were still out there. Watching from the shadows of time, somewhere in the far future, the Shepherds continued their eternal vigil. They had guided one timeline away from destruction, but there would always be new threats. New empires that grew too powerful, new weapons that could destroy everything. But now there was also hope. Humanity had learned that they were not alone in their fight for freedom. They carried within their genes the potential to become something greater than themselves. The timeline was preserved. The galaxy was free, and humanity had taken its first steps toward becoming the Shepherds of tomorrow.